Imagine this. You wake up in a world where every answer to every question is instantly at your fingertips. A flick of your wrist, a swipe of a glowing screen, and entire libraries of human knowledge unfold before you like a magician's trick. You don't even have to remember phone numbers, directions, or how to spell certain words. Technology does the remembering for you. It feels like freedom, doesn't it? It feels like progress, like evolution itself bending to your convenience. But then, in a quiet moment, you notice something strange. Your mind, once sharp with curiosity, doesn't dig as deeply anymore. Your thoughts, once restless and alive, now feel lazy, softened, almost dulled. You know where to find answers, but do you truly understand them? You can access infinite knowledge, yet your own ability to wrestle with uncertainty, to struggle with the friction of thought, seems to be fading. This is the paradox of modern society. The more tools we build to make us smarter, the more we risk becoming stupid. Think about it. When was the last time you sat with a question, really sat with it, let it gnaw at you, frustrate you, force you to explore the depths of your own reasoning without immediately reaching for your phone? When was the last time you remembered something, not because it was convenient, but because it was meaningful, carved into your memory through effort and struggle? We have outsourced not just memory, but imagination itself. Algorithms predict what you want to watch before you even know it. Autocorrect finishes your sentences. Autocomplete finishes your searches. And artificial intelligence now writes, paints, and even thinks in your place. Isn't it ironic? In an age where humans command more information than ever in history, fewer people seem capable of thinking deeply for themselves. So let me ask you, is this progress, or is this decay cleverly disguised as progress? The Greeks once believed that true wisdom was born not from knowing many things, but from knowing yourself. Know thyself, carved into the temple of Apollo at Delphi, was a warning and a command. But what happens when you no longer need to know yourself? When the machine already knows you better than you do? When your own preferences, desires, and fears are predicted, packaged, and sold back to you with clinical precision? It feels like freedom, but is it? Or is it a trap where every decision is guided, every curiosity channeled, and every thought reduced to data points inside a system you barely understand? Imagine standing at the edge of a vast library, its shelves infinite, its corridors unending. Yet instead of wandering, instead of getting lost and discovering unexpected treasures, you're handed a single book, already chosen for you, because some invisible hand decided it's what you want. You read it, you nod, you move on. And the illusion of learning feels complete, but deep down you know you've been cheated. You've traded wonder for efficiency, curiosity for convenience. And here lies the haunting question. Are we truly smarter than the generations before us, or have we simply become efficient parrots repeating information we never struggled to earn? It's unsettling, isn't it? Because the modern world has made stupidity feel comfortable. You don't notice it happening. You don't feel your intelligence slipping away. Instead, you feel entertained, connected, even empowered. You scroll endlessly, your brain bathed in dopamine, and mistake this flood of stimulation for thought. You mistake distraction for depth. But imagine, really imagine, that one day you wake up and realize your mind no longer feels like your own. You can consume, but you can't create. You can follow, but you can't lead. You can remember fragments, but not the whole. And worst of all, you no longer even notice what's missing. This is the great paradox of modern society. The tools that promise to enlighten us may, in truth, be quietly making us blind. So here we are, confronted with a question that is not just practical, but existential. Are we becoming the architects of our own stupidity? And if so, what force, psychological, philosophical, or even spiritual, drives this transformation? The answer is not simple. It lies hidden beneath the surface of our daily lives, buried in the philosophies we've forgotten and the psychological patterns we deny. But to see it, to truly grasp it, we must dig into the roots of human thought itself. And so the journey begins, not with answers, but with the courage to confront the terrifying possibility that modernity, for all its brilliance, may secretly be dimming the very light of the human mind. If modern society is truly making us stupid, then the question isn't merely how it happens, it's why. Why would a civilization obsessed with intelligence, knowledge, and progress willingly engineer its own decline? Why would we build machines that think for us, devices that remember for us, and systems that choose for us, while neglecting the very muscles of thought that once defined our humanity? To answer that, we must go beneath the surface, into the underworld of psychology and philosophy, where the truth often hides. Carl Jung once warned of the shadow, the dark, unconscious side of the human psyche that we repress but can never escape. The shadow isn't just our personal darkness, it is also collective. In modernity, our collective shadow is dependency. We worship progress, but secretly we long for ease. We celebrate intelligence, but secretly we crave relief from the burden of thinking. That is the root. Not stupidity as an accident, but stupidity as a seduction. Think about it. Nietzsche saw it coming more than a century ago when he declared that the modern age would be plagued by nihilism, a slow erosion of meaning. In a world without transcendent purpose, without gods or higher order, what remains? Comfort, entertainment, the endless distractions that dull the existential ache of living without ultimate answers. Why wrestle with meaning when you can binge another show, scroll another feed, swipe another face into temporary satisfaction? But here lies the paradox. The easier life becomes, the less prepared we are to bear its weight. We no longer need to remember stories because they are archived. We no longer need to debate because an algorithm ranks the best answers for us. We no longer need to imagine because artificial intelligence generates images, words, and music on demand. What happens when the mind forgets how to struggle? When the very friction that gave rise to wisdom is polished away? Arthur Schopenhauer described life as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. Pain forced us to survive. Boredom forced us to create. But what happens in a world designed to erase both? When suffering is medicated and boredom is drowned in endless streams of digital noise, where does wisdom come from? Where does genius emerge? The frightening truth is this: our stupidity is not born of ignorance, but of abundance. We are drowning in information, suffocated by convenience, paralyzed by the illusion of endless choice. And as Viktor Frankl reminded us, when meaning is stripped away, when suffering and striving are numbed, we become hollow, existentially vacant beings. But there is a deeper psychological current at play. Consider this. Our minds evolved in scarcity. For thousands of years, survival depended on memory, awareness, and sharp reasoning. The brain was sculpted by necessity. To forget was to die. To fail to imagine danger was to fall prey. Every ounce of intelligence was forged in the crucible of need. Now, the crucible is gone. Need has been replaced by comfort. Effort has been replaced by automation. Struggle has been replaced by stimulation. And the brain, deprived of its ancient training ground, atrophies like an unused muscle. Do you see the trap? What once defined humanity, the ability to wrestle with reality, to hold chaos in the mind and carve meaning from it, is being quietly outsourced. The tools meant to amplify us are paradoxically erasing the very capacities they claim to enhance. Jung would call this an archetypal inversion. The hero becomes the slave. The tool becomes the master. Technology, once the fire we stole from the gods, now casts shadows taller than us. We no longer ask, what can I do with this tool? Instead, we ask, what would I be without it? And the silence that follows terrifies us. Even Sartre, with his insistence on radical freedom, might look at our age and see a tragic contradiction. We are free to choose, but our choices are guided by invisible systems. We are free to think, but our thinking is nudged, predicted, optimized. Freedom has become a spectacle, not a reality. And as Sartre warned, when we surrender responsibility for our choices, we also surrender the essence of who we are. So why is modern society making us stupid? Because stupidity is easier than wisdom. Because distraction feels safer than reflection. Because comfort is sweeter than struggle. And perhaps most unsettling of all, because the system was designed this way, not by some grand conspiracy, but by the logic of our own desires. We wanted convenience, and we got it. We wanted answers, and they were given. We wanted freedom from struggle, and the price was our minds. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what happens when the why is gone? When the hunger for wisdom is replaced by the craving for stimulation, the how becomes meaningless, and so does the human being
being who lives it. This is the psychological and philosophical root of our decline, a civilization that has mistaken the removal of struggle for the advancement of intelligence, and in doing so has begun to hollow itself from the inside. But here is the danger. The consequences of this shift are not abstract. They are not confined to philosophy books or late-night conversations. They bleed into everything: our relationships, our politics, our culture, our very sense of self. The real horror is not just that society is making us stupid, it's that stupidity has consequences we can't yet see. Consequences that are already shaping the world around us in ways we barely notice. And that is where we must turn next, into the unseen shadows cast by this hidden decline.
The truth about decline is that it rarely announces itself. Civilizations don't wake up one morning to find a neon sign flashing, "You are getting dumber." Instead, it creeps in like fog, silent, subtle, obscuring the landscape until we no longer know where we are. And the consequences? They don't strike all at once. They spread, slowly, invisibly, until the damage feels normal. Let's start with the most intimate level, our relationships. Have you noticed how much harder it feels to hold a deep conversation? Not just small talk, not just gossip, but the kind of soul-shaping dialogue that builds intimacy and trust. Somewhere along the way, we traded long evenings of thought for quick messages, emotional vulnerability for emoji reactions, listening for scrolling. This isn't accidental. When you rely on curated feeds and algorithmic conversations, you begin to lose the muscle for real connection. The art of patience in dialogue fades. The subtle cues of body language, tone, and silence are replaced by rapid-fire communication, designed not to connect, but to stimulate. Philosopher Martin Buber warned that without genuine I-thou relationships, authentic encounters with another soul, we reduce others to objects, to I-it. And what could be more dehumanizing than reducing a human being to just another piece of content? But the decay doesn't stop there. It bleeds into politics and culture. When thinking weakens, slogans replace arguments, memes replace philosophy, outrage replaces dialogue, and so societies begin to fracture, not because of disagreement, that's healthy, but because of the inability to think together. Nietzsche once declared that madness is rare in the individual, but the rule in groups. Look at the digital agora of our age and you'll see what he meant. Collective stupidity thrives where nuance dies. We are more connected than ever, yet we live in echo chambers, each one convinced it holds the truth while being shaped by unseen algorithms. This is not mere polarization, it is intellectual decay disguised as passion, and it is one of the clearest consequences of our forgotten struggle with thought. Now consider creativity and culture. For centuries, boredom was the seedbed of art. From the stillness of solitude came poetry, music, painting, the great works of humanity. Today, boredom is almost extinct. Every second of silence is filled by a notification. Every empty space is plastered with stimulation. And so we see not art born of reflection, but content manufactured for attention. Carl Jung argued that creativity is not just an act of expression, but of confrontation, meeting the unconscious, wrestling with archetypes, dragging meaning out of the shadows. But when the unconscious is drowned by constant noise, when silence is avoided at all costs, what remains for art to reveal? The result is a culture of imitation, not creation. A world where originality suffocates under the weight of algorithms that reward sameness. And then there's our inner life, the most haunting consequence of all. When was the last time you sat alone without distraction and truly faced yourself? Most of us avoid it. Why? Because self-reflection requires struggle. It requires patience. It requires silence. And we are losing the capacity for all three. Viktor Frankl warned that when meaning is stripped away, humans become restless, anxious, desperate. He called it the existential vacuum, a spiritual emptiness at the heart of modern life. That vacuum doesn't announce itself with fanfare, it seeps into sleepless nights, restless scrolling, the quiet ache of feeling unmoored in a world that seems louder yet emptier every day. This is what makes our stupidity so dangerous. It is not loud,
it is silent. It does not break the world in a single blow, it hollows it slowly until it collapses from within. The ancients feared apocalypse through fire or flood. Ours may come through distraction, comfort, and thoughtlessness. The slow death of attention, the quiet erosion of imagination, the decay of meaning. And here lies the chilling twist. The very tools we believe are connecting us are isolating us. The very abundance of information is starving us of wisdom. The very freedom of choice is paralyzing us into action. Jean Baudrillard, the postmodern philosopher, said we are drowning not in reality, but in simulacra, copies without originals, signs that no longer point to truth but to other signs, endlessly looping. That is our age, not stupidity born of ignorance, but stupidity born of noise. And noise has consequences. It warps democracies, it weakens relationships, it sterilizes creativity, it hollows the soul. So ask yourself, what kind of civilization emerges when thinking becomes optional, when silence is intolerable, when wisdom is replaced by distraction? Perhaps the most terrifying consequence of all is that this decline does not feel catastrophic. It feels convenient. It feels pleasant. It feels normal. And by the time we notice, it may already be too late. But here's the catch. Consequences can still be reversed if we dare to confront them, if we choose to step into the silence, face the shadow, and rebuild the muscles of thought we have neglected. And that takes us to the next chapter. Not just the problem, not just its hidden roots, not just its consequences, but the possibility of resistance.
Rebellion doesn't always begin with fire in the streets. Sometimes it begins in silence. Sometimes it begins with a single refusal, a quiet but absolute no to the tide dragging you into mediocrity. Imagine yourself in a crowded room where everyone is shouting. The noise is unbearable, yet no one notices because they've grown used to it. The rebellion in that moment is not to shout louder, but to stand in silence, to choose stillness in a world allergic to it. That is the first act of resistance, reclaiming attention. Attention is not just a mental resource, it is your life. What you give attention to, you give existence to. The problem of modern stupidity begins here. Our attention colonized by devices, feeds, and constant stimulation. But here's the radical truth. Attention can be trained like a muscle, and silence, boredom, and deep focus are its gym. Try this. No screen, no distraction, just you and a book for an hour, or a blank page, or even nothing but your own thoughts. At first, it feels unbearable. Your mind will scream for escape, but stay long enough and something changes. The noise begins to settle. The fog begins to clear. You remember that your mind is not just a consumer of fragments, but a creator of meaning. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The rebellion is about recovering the why, and you cannot recover it without attention. The second act of resistance, rebuilding conversation. Our age thrives on performance. We don't speak to connect, we speak to signal, to show our tribe we belong, to prove we are clever, to win likes, not hearts. The rebellion is to risk real dialogue, to sit across from someone and listen, not for a turn to speak, not to win, but to understand. Socrates built entire philosophies not by declaring, but by asking questions. Jung listened to the unconscious of his patients not by interrupting, but by letting silence breathe. Rebellion is having the courage to speak the truth in a culture obsessed with image, but also the humility to listen in a world addicted to noise. Every authentic conversation is a crack in the mask of stupidity. The third act, recovering art and imagination. Modern culture rewards content. It punishes contemplation. It pays for productivity, not depth. But art is not about efficiency. It is about revelation. The rebellion is not to produce faster, but to create deeper. Write something that costs you your comfort. Paint something that frightens you. Compose music that refuses to be background noise. Arthur Schopenhauer argued that art is the one escape from the blind striving of existence, the one glimpse into truth itself. To create, or even to
engage with art deeply is to resist the flattening of the soul. And yet, rebellion cannot be purely individual. Stupidity is contagious. Wisdom must be too. Which leads to the fourth act, building intellectual communities. The Enlightenment coffee houses, the Parisian salons, the underground reading groups of censored regimes. All of them were incubators of thought. They were acts of collective defiance. Today, rebellion may mean forming spaces, physical or digital, where distraction is banned and dialogue is sacred, where reading a difficult book together is valued more than sharing a viral video, where ideas are not simplified into slogans, but stretched, tested, broken, rebuilt. The rebellion is not just personal discipline, it is cultural counter-creation. But perhaps the deepest rebellion lies in facing the shadow. Carl Jung taught that each of us carries within us a shadow, the repressed, the denied, the parts of ourselves we fear. Modern distraction is often an escape from this confrontation. We scroll not because we seek pleasure, but because we fear silence, for in silence the shadow speaks. To rebel is to turn toward it, to admit ignorance, to face fears, to wrestle with the monsters inside before projecting them onto others. A society incapable of shadow work is condemned to scapegoating, blaming enemies for what it cannot face in itself. The true rebellion, then, is radical self-honesty, to stop running, to stop pretending, to face the darkness, so that intelligence is not just cleverness, but wisdom born of suffering and confrontation. But here's the paradox. Rebellion is not glamorous. It doesn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looks like going for a walk without your phone. Sometimes it looks like choosing a book instead of endless scrolling. Sometimes it looks like asking a difficult question in a conversation that could have stayed comfortable. The small acts matter because they train the soul. Every time you reclaim your attention, you weaken the grip of distraction. Every time you choose silence, you strengthen your mind. Every time you face the shadow, you reclaim your humanity. And here's the terrifying but liberating truth. No one is coming to save us. There will be no mass awakening, no technological fix, no sudden reversal. The rebellion begins, as it always has, with individuals, with you, with me, with anyone willing to suffer the discomfort of thinking in a world that prefers thoughtlessness. But if even a small number of us choose to resist, the consequences ripple outward. Just as stupidity spreads, so does wisdom. One act of attention begets another. One conversation sparks a chain of honesty. One work of art awakens something sleeping in another soul. The rebellion is possible, but it demands courage, and courage is rare. So the question is not whether society is making us stupid, it is whether you are willing to rebel against it, whether you are willing to endure silence, to face the shadow, to reclaim your mind. Because the real war is not fought on battlefields, but in the human soul, and the future belongs to those willing to suffer the weight of thought. And yet, even rebellion is not the end of the story. Behind it lies something even deeper, even more haunting, the final truth about intelligence, stupidity, and what it means to be human.
Imagine this. You've rebelled. You've turned off the noise, silenced the constant demands, reclaimed your attention, faced your shadow, and begun to think for yourself again. For a moment, you feel liberated, as if you've broken through the fog. But then, a more unsettling question arises. Liberated for what? This is the ultimate problem modern society hides from us. We imagine stupidity as the absence of knowledge, the failure to be informed. But the deeper truth is far more terrifying. Stupidity thrives not because we lack facts, but because we lack meaning. You can master silence, train your attention, read every book in your library, but without a deeper anchor, you remain vulnerable. You can be clever, articulate, educated, and still drift into emptiness. Modernity produces not just shallow minds, but hollow souls. And this is the final truth. Stupidity is not ignorance, it is meaninglessness. Carl Jung warned of this when he said, "Man cannot stand a meaningless life." Viktor Frankl, who endured Auschwitz, went further. Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. What destroys us is not pain, not even distraction, it is the void. Our age worships information, but starves for wisdom. We are drowning in data, yet spiritually malnourished. We scroll endlessly, not because we are stupid, but because we are desperate for connection, for purpose, for something larger than ourselves. And here lies the irony. Society does not make us stupid by accident. It makes us stupid because stupidity is profitable. A population chasing entertainment is easier to control than a population chasing meaning. A citizen consumed by noise will never notice the silence of truth. The final rebellion, then, is not merely to think, but to choose meaning over emptiness. But what does that mean? Does it mean religion, philosophy, art, love, work? Perhaps all of them, perhaps none. Nietzsche declared God is dead, but what he meant was not that God had been murdered, but that the modern world had lost its anchor. And in the vacuum, people did not become free thinkers, they became slaves to distraction, to ideology, to comfort. The ultimate truth is that every society will try to make you stupid, not because people in power plot it, but because distraction is easier than reflection, consumption easier than creation, conformity easier than rebellion. Stupidity is not just an accident, it is the default. And so if you want to escape, you must not only resist, you must replace. You must fill the void with something worthy of your soul. Maybe it's art, maybe it's philosophy, maybe it's faith. Maybe it's building something that will outlast you. But here's the paradox. No one can give you meaning. Not me, not society, not even history's greatest philosophers. Meaning cannot be delivered. It must be discovered. It is forged in suffering, revealed in silence, and chosen again and again in the face of despair. Modern society tells you that intelligence is cleverness, that progress is speed, that value is productivity. But the final truth is this: intelligence without meaning collapses into clever stupidity. Progress without purpose becomes destruction. Productivity without love becomes slavery. You are not called to be clever, you're called to be awake. Awake to your shadow. Awake to your mortality. Awake to the fact that the world wants you distracted, addicted, numb. And yet, the very fact that you can hear this, feel this, consider this, means you are not lost. Somewhere in you, the ember of rebellion burns. Somewhere in you, the hunger for truth remains. You are not stupid, you are asleep, and sleep can end. The final rebellion, then, is not grand or violent. It is quiet, inward, relentless. It is the daily choice to turn away from emptiness and toward meaning. To create instead of consume, to listen instead of shout, to think instead of scroll, to love instead of signal. And if you do, you may discover something terrifyingly beautiful. The world has always been broken, shallow, stupid, and yet meaning has always been available, waiting for those willing to suffer the search. Nietzsche once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." Modern society feeds the chaos, but it will never give you the star. That is your task, your responsibility, your destiny. So the question remains, will you accept the sleep, the numbness, the comfort of stupidity, or will you rebel silently, courageously, and search for the star within the chaos? Because the final truth is that society is not making us stupid. The final truth is that society is making it easier than ever to choose stupidity over meaning. And the choice is yours. The world will not wait. Time will not pause. The machines will not stop, but you can. You must, because if you do not choose meaning, meaning will never choose you. And that, perhaps, is the only decision that separates monsters from humans, noise from wisdom, and stupidity from intelligence. The final question remains, and it is yours alone to answer. Will you choose meaning or be consumed by the void?